Today, we're talking with a truly exceptional cast of design leaders. To level set for a moment, the design field has come a long way over the past decade with the growth of design thinking and human-centered design principles. However, we still have some way to go. In fact, accessibility design has proven to perform better for a business, including stronger search performance, expanded reach, streamlined UX and UI, and faster download times. Today, we'll talk about the definition of inclusive design, going beyond the fundamentals as we explore major considerations and lessons learned in designing accessible digital products, some use cases of success and failure, as well as emerging trends in inclusive design. So let's welcome the panelists. They're allowing them to introduce themselves. I'll start off by unpinning myself and moving on to Frank. Hi, Frank, are you there?
Hey, good. I will turn my camera on then.
Yeah, I'd love to see you.
Oh, there I am. Hey, everybody. Yeah, as mentioned, my name's Frank. I'm a lead product designer at Headspace, based in Los Angeles. Been working at Headspace for close to 5 years now, and have been lucky to be part of the journey of the company, going from the first to market meditation app to now a product that covers all types of kind of wellness aspects and routines like meditation, sleep, fitness, and recently music that can help you focus. Inclusivity and accessibility are things that we talk about often. They're top of mind, not just in the product, but as a company in general. Our sort of mission is improving the health and happiness of the world. And so when we say that of the world part, we're serious about it. And we know that there's got to be a through line of inclusivity all the way from where we source talent from to how we create our design system, and what the culmination of all that is in the final kind of product that lives on your phone at the end of the day. So that's my little intro, and we'll pass it on to the next.
Wonderful, thanks, Frank. Looking forward to your insights. Next is Yunju. Hi, Yunju, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys see me?
Yeah,
yes.
We can see you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm a UX design lead at Google Assistant team in California. This is my career map. I studied as a web designer in South Korea, came to the state to study the human-centered design, and worked as a UX design manager at Motorola. I joined Qualcomm in San Diego, and I worked on the augmented reality field. Came back to South Korea to lead the UX team for wearables product at Samsung, and came back to the Silicon Valley again, back and forth. Honored to be here.
Wow, Yunju, what a journey. And we feel so privileged to have you in our discussion today. Thank you so much for that introduction. Next, we have JR. Hi, JR, streaming in from the West Coast.
Yeah, hi everyone. I don't have a fancy map to show you guys my career journey. I'm bashful now, but my career journey started, however, in Florida, as a UX writer, copywriter, with a company called Groove Shark shortly after college, right at the beginning of like the app craze. Went into agency side for a little bit, and then find my way back into tech with a company called cPanel in Houston, Texas, and finally made my way all the way to the West Coast. So I just continued inching my way west to Google, where I'm currently serving as a UX writing lead for Google My Business, and handling a lot of accessibility efforts for voiceover and talkback technology. And I'm super excited to be chatting with these folks on the panel today.
Wonderful, JR. Thank you for being with us. Looking forward to your insights too. And last but certainly not least, we've got Klaus from Capital One. Hi, Klaus. You're on mute.
Of course, classic Zoom error.
Good.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here on this panel. My name is Klaus Heesch. My pronouns are he, him. I am based here in the beautiful, though currently somewhat sleepy, New York City, where I live with my wife of 23 years, our 15-year-old daughter, and a sweet little chihuahua named Farah the dog that you can find on Instagram. My career kind of followed your path, JR. Started in Florida. I've been largely grounded in branding and interactive, and I'm currently a director of experience design at Capital One on the consumer card and bank acquisitions and welcome team. My team and my partners are responsible for a journey that shepherds customers through the marketed experience, getting to know our brand, choosing a product that fits their life, and then through the application and setup of their new account for quick and easy access to managing their money.
Wonderful. Thank you, Klaus. Can't wait to hear your experiences too and insights. So how we're going to start today is with a question for each of our panelists, just to get some insight from them in a respective area before we move into the group discussions. So let's start with Frank. Headspace has been a leader in the category of mindfulness, as you mentioned, for the past few years. And it's not just because it was an innovator in the space, but also because of the inclusive experience of the app. What are some of the core design principles you have implemented to ensure Headspace remains accessible and inclusive for all?
Yeah, I think that covers kind of two areas of focus. One being the brand side, which is, I think, one of the keys to Headspace's success has been our approach to using characters and animation and illustration to talk about emotions and feelings and thoughts and all of these kind of things that come up in a mindfulness practice. And rather than kind of presenting like photos or being very literal about it, we've kind of done it in an almost cartoonish way, which I think makes it more approachable and a little bit more inviting for people to talk about all the big things from life to death. That if it's presented to me in a bright cartoony way, it feels a little bit less harsh. And in that, I think there's been a strategy to be approachable for everybody, so that we're not singling out, this is a product experience for like this type of person or that type of person. And then on the product side or the user experience side, making sure that, when we're setting up things like, for example, our design system components, we're working on button states or typography, making sure that we are covering our bases for things like, the proper color contrast, or making sure that we're using haptic feedback in a way that is meaningful for people. We're recently looking at how we can make the app more accessible for a landscape view, because it's currently only available in portrait view. So there's a lot on the product side, but I think it's definitely not perfect yet, but I think we're getting there and making some really good steps toward that. And as a designer, I think I'm getting smarter at building the business case to getting these things done, which has been kind of an unlock for us, because you sort of know what is the right thing to do. But in a company of a few hundred people, it can sometimes be a challenge to fight for the user and only the user. And so for me, like as a personal growth thing, I'm starting to wrap my mind around how those things come together. And I think it can be powerful.
That's really interesting. And I think there's a lot of designers out there that would love to hear your thoughts on how to create and pitch those use cases from the business side. That's a big part of the challenge and the opportunity too. Wonderful. Thanks, Frank. Next question is for Yunju. Your experience, as you pointed out, is incredibly impressive, to say the least. You played a key role in the early days of Samsung's wearables before moving to Google to work on Google Assistant. In general, if you were to reflect on the progress being made globally around inclusive design, where do you think we sit and what needs to be true for inclusive design to reach its full potential?
Yes, I think we have made pretty good progress on it, from accessibility or universal design mind to broader inclusive design, especially for the emerging technologies like AR, VR, machine learning, wearables, and voice assistant systems. Inclusive design is a primary design principle rather than a secondary one. it is a truly a core design criteria to meet a diverse set of human factors, such as physical factors like different human bodies, and social factors like different languages and dialogues. We often have this mindset that it's a good thing to do or the right thing to do. But if you don't apply inclusive design in your products for emerging technologies, which have a physical interactions, your design is not just bad, but it's unusable. Where do we sit? Nowadays, users are the designers. They are content creators, they are content reviewers, and they are product sellers. So users are a part of this ecosystem. This is a both and good and bad for inclusive design. The collective community bias can power the machine learning algorithm. And all the historical data can certainly be a bias in machine learning. So small groups can easily be unheard and unseen in this environment. When we design a platform as a product, we need to make sure we build proper tools like flagging inappropriate content. The platform also needs to help underrepresented groups and guide users to build a healthy community. Since inclusion needs a contribution from everyone, we need to work together.
Fantastic. Well, I know that everyone was glued to that answer because you hit on so many rich and important points. Thank you, Inju. And then we're going to get into the live conversation with everyone chiming in just a moment. So that was really insightful, and I can't wait to unpack some of those principles too. Next, for JR, we often think about design through the lens of visual elements and forget about the importance of copy and the power of words in making a digital experience feel unique and really enjoyable. What are a few examples where brands and products miss the mark when it comes to UX writing? And what principles and practices could be put in place to optimize inclusive writing techniques?
Yeah, so I'm not religious, but I always quote the Bible when people talk, when I'm at the design table, and I always say, in the beginning was the word. And, like when we think about like GUIs and graphic user interfaces, like, that's like relatively new. And when we think about like technology, most interfaces were text-based interfaces when we first started doing any type of like digital product development. And even when we go back to like the beginning of my career or the beginning of like what design was in terms of like the human consumption in the capitalistic sense, when I think about advertising, it always started with a copywriter coming up with the idea, then working alongside a designer to come with and tell the story. And so when I think about the copy and the language, and I think for me it's not just about the inclusivity, but the importance of it as a function of the business, is that the language the business uses is just as important as the colors and the fonts that they use. Like they go hand in hand. You will never, like the Mattel will not have, Barbie use the word rad, or Headspace will probably not have really aggressive technology, if that's for what their service is. And so that's an important way to think about language and the voice and tone as a part of the design system of the product. And now when we talk about inclusivity, I would say an important part that I have to make sure that I'm bringing into the design space and speaking with my cross-functional partners is understanding that not only should we not be idiomatic, and idiomatic is like, I'm not going to be using my American colloquialisms in product, because those don't translate. Those don't necessarily translate across the US, and those certainly don't translate globally. And especially when you're building a global product, you need to make sure that you are building and writing language that can be understood by a global audience. And oftentimes, especially at my current job, we have to work with translators in 72 plus languages. So I have to be very mindful about the type of language that we're putting inside the copy to make sure that the translators can change that effectively. In addition, one thing I always say that, the Bay Area, a lot of people are walking around in our bubbles with, certain salaries and sort of education that is not representative of the rest of the world. And most of the world doesn't have master's plus degrees. And our products should not sound, and our design should not sound like they were written by English professors. And so we want to make sure when we talk about, writing and language from an inclusive standpoint, you want to make sure you're writing at no more than an eighth grade reading level. I know that's kind of a hard thing to measure, but there are tools online that can help you to figure that out. But you want to make sure it doesn't sound like it was written by like a room of college professors, particularly because not just from a translation standpoint, but also from like an education standpoint. Again, not everybody is reading at a collegiate reading level, and you want to make sure that you are not excluding a huge swath of the population for the desire to sound smart, and you don't get any brownie points for sounding smart, and especially in product. And it's in a lot of ways, like product development, especially from the writing standpoint, is a very empathetic thing to do. You have to think about the user and speak like the user, and write in ways that as many users as you can, as feasibly can understand you, as well as your product. And I'll hop off my like copy high horse right now.
Really wonderful insight there, JR. And you struck a few chords with us, and I'm sure those tuned in terms of its accessibility from a writing standpoint, and eighth grade kind of level reading is an important component to remember. Looking forward to diving into that more. Finally, Klaus, you're a fellow champion of happiness and mindfulness too. When it comes to designing for everyone, a key component of this practice is research and user testing, much like JR just referred to there. What guidelines do you and your team practice when conducting research and testing to ensure all segments and personas are considered in that phase?
Thank you, Ian. I'm so glad you threw this my way, because I am not a researcher, and I'm not mathy. So I really appreciate and value the practice. And at Capital One, I'm learning a ton about this through our fantastic research colleagues who specialize in this. I would have to say that when it comes to understanding our audience, and this I think hits a few of the notes that Frank, Yunju, and JR all touched on, is a moving away from simplistic or generic personas, if you will. That idea that everyone's going to fit into some sort of average is not appropriate, and it's not inclusive. And it leaves a lot of people, in fact, excluded. So historically, I know a lot of designers have worked around the idea of a persona, and the example might be that we're going to design this experience through the eyes of a millennial, and our persona is a user named Jane, a 23-year-old college graduate who loves to shop. The problem with that is, and the thing we have to understand is that every individual isn't locked into one mode and doesn't fit into one standard, so that all 23-year-old college graduates just don't think alike. So I think that the practice is moving towards a shift to archetypes, which I guess it's the Joseph Campbell and Jungian idea of the hero's journey, that we have to begin to understand that anyone in any group travels through their own journey, and the hurdles and the challenges that each faces are many and different. Those experiences, socioeconomic backgrounds, education, as JR touched on, and many more factors shape our attitudes and our views. And we as designers have to take that into consideration. And I think, and I totally get this in the context of Headspace, because you start, you're starting with the concept of mindfulness, and you're developing this practice where you're going to grow in that practice, and you're going to go beyond the beginner level. And so one of the things that I think we all need to keep in mind, and this is certainly something that is emphasized across our design org, is that you have to respect that journey, and our obligation as designers is to realize that we're designing for the long haul. And these experiences that we're making should evolve and adapt to our users' place in life, meeting them where they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
because
I'll leave it there.
absolutely, great points. And as you mentioned, your example, I think Jane was her name, as a millennial, that just refers to when she was born. Like, she's on this journey. What is Jane's way of behaving when she's 40? Very different to how she behaved when she was 20, as an example, perhaps, who knows? But great point. So we touched on principles, we touched on learnings, we touched on writing, we touched on personas and testing. We're going to dig more into that now. So let's go into some group questions. Let's start with Frank and Yunju leading the answer, and then feel free to build, JR and Klaus. I recently read a wonderful quote by one of your colleagues at Google there, Annie Jean-Baptiste, who's the head of product inclusion at Google, who states that if you don't have inclusive inputs, you won't have inclusive outputs, and the repercussions can last for generations. Can you define what exactly these inclusive inputs are and how designers and strategists should be employing them on a regular basis? Frank, do you want to
jump in? Sure. Yeah, I think when you said inputs, what came to mind was people. People build the products, and we have our teams, and we have sprints, and we have squads and pods and all that stuff. And I think that those teams, if you can make them as inclusive as possible, hearing from as many different people as you can, from different backgrounds, different life journeys, different languages, just a totally making sure that there's not a lot of kind of sameness in the types of people that you're inviting to these groups, then you should have better outcomes, as far not just business outcomes, but sort of the more human metrics of are people enjoying this product? Do they feel like it understands them? Do they feel some type of connection and community to the the service or product that you're building? And when it would be easy to look around the room and think, okay, let's make sure we bring all these people from all these teams in to to be heard while we are building X feature or X product. But I think you got to go back. You got to go back one level and look at the recruiting pipeline. I know that's a big. I think it's a big topic, and because maybe the people in the room are not an accurate representation of the folks you're creating for. And I've felt this firsthand. We've got we're obviously all from home now, but previous to this, we were working out of headquarters in Santa Monica, and the day-to-day of Santa Monica is definitely not an average thing for the as I said, the health and happiness of the world. I wake up every day and it's bright and sunny, and I got a smile on my face. But looking back at my former life before moving here, most days were gloomy and cloudy. So that's a totally different. It's just a different day-to-day life. I do think, speaking about the working from home aspect, I do think that as a company, we've seen, not only have we been able to attract a much broader set of individuals coming to the company, I do think opening up the hiring to not only being based in major cities it's such a game changer in the most positive way. And I can literally see it every day. When we're working on the app, I can see those incremental changes and how we're so much better for it. So I went on a bit of a tangent, but I'll pass it over to Yunju.
Yeah, I can jump in here for this one. When we say machine learning, sometimes we think it's a magic box. It will magically happen. Well, it's not true. The machine starts based on data samples, input from humans. Then the machine builds a solution, an output, which inherits human bias. I can give you an example. It was in 2014. Samsung made its second generation smartwatch that had the heart rate sensor for the very first time. It was even before the Apple Watch on the market. After a long algorithm tuning, we sent a working prototype to global regional offices for testing. A few days later, many regional teams reported about its inaccuracy. What was wrong? The heart rate is calculated by flashing this LED light on skin. It turned out that the data sample that the engineering team used was too narrow, and it didn't account for different skin colors and skin textures. If you don't have inclusive input, you only have inclusive output. In the Samsung's watch example, the output was almost unusable to sell a product that we had to go back and fix it. So literally, when Annie mentioned that input reflect output, is a literal example for that statement.
It's a great example. Thank you, Yunju, for sharing that and for the visual reference. It really is insightful, to say the least, and also a huge learning going forward. I think we've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to dive to the next questions. And this next one, let's have Klaus and JR lead. If there is any brand you really think nails their inclusive design approach, what will those be? Even your own, perhaps, whatever you believe.
I could hop in. For me, I don't think there's one brand or one company that really like hits it out of the park in terms of like inclusive design, especially when you have brand is also very different than product, right? And so I think it's very easy to bring out a brand message that works. You know, you change the language, change some colors there, you put some closed caption on it, but product moves a lot slower. Product moves a lot slower, and it needs to be a lot more careful. And I think it's a little bit more pernicious when product does it wrong. I do think also when we think about inclusivity, like it's hard to say any one company is doing it right, because then you're incorporating race, ethnicity, sexuality, nationality, socioeconomic status, motor ability, vision ability, and it's just like they need not all be lumped together. It's impossible to lump them all together. However, I do think certain companies are making certain concerted efforts for certain parts of these identities very well. I would say this inherently a bit biased, but I think I've just been spending a lot of time testing screen reader technology and voiceover and talkback, and I just get more and more impressed at the sophistication in which someone that doesn't have vision can use iOS as well as Android products. I think for me it was a learning curve for me to learn how to use it, but I do think I get really impressed at the technology that has gone into making sure that these handheld devices and our laptops can be used and and be made accessible to people that don't have vision or hearing or the same level of motor abilities that I do.
That's such a good answer. I just agree 100% with what you just said, JR. And when I pondered this question, I really don't know what the approach that many of the other brands take. So not having that insight into how they come up with the products, I can say that when I look across, so the industry I'm currently in, the financial industry, I think that there's product-wise, there's some pretty awesome things happening. The democratization of trading, for example, access to the trading markets, which used to be just for wealthy white Wall Streeters, empowerment. And I know that it's a touchy subject right now, but like a company like Robinhood making trading available to everyone. This is like even something like the concept of fractional shares, meaning that if you don't have $1,000 to invest in that stock, well, you've got 50, so you can get a start. Companies like Acorns developing a product that helps folks understand the basic and start saving right away in a kind of a way that eases them into an understanding of saving and investing. And when I think about honestly, to not to sound like I'm bragging, but I think Capital One is nailing it. As a designer in this organization, I think the level of emotional intelligence that has been preached and included in the hiring, diversity, inclusion, all of that is raising the level of awareness on the design teams, and it's helping empower designers. So, and I think that turns up in the products we're developing. Our Eno, our intelligent assistant, we were the first financial institution to develop an Alexa skill. So seeing that opportunity, I think, is starting to open doors for accessibility. The secured card that Capital One offers, helping those who may be struggling to establish credit, having access to start building their credit. And I feel like product innovation in itself, without getting into the details of process for designing for accessibility itself, I think opening doors through the products that companies are creating. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting lost in a swirl here,
that's
but
great. Accessibility through the product is a great example itself. Great, thank you. I want to move to this next question, which is the user research and testing component. We touched on it. It's important. I think those tuned in want to learn more and be better. So maybe Yunju and Frank, you take this one. User research and testing is an integral component to the inclusive design process. What are some of the best practices in UX research and design that others should consider when approaching testing? Can you give any examples of an insight that led to a feature change or an update?
Yeah, I can start. For user research and testing, recruiting a diverse set of participants is important for sure, especially for us at the Google Assistant team. We try to include people with a different accent and different family types. That's because that's really critical for our product. And then we invite project members to observe sessions and take notes. We do a quick debrief right after the session with observers who observe the same session to exchange notes. After all sessions are done, we do a whole synthesizing workshop together to evaluate any subjective bias and insight, the things that we need to go back to data. These multi-layer group discussions are very necessary in qualitative user research and testing. The subtle nuance and gestures are often lost in the report. This is really important. Inclusive design can be a fancy but conceptual word. But seeing different people using a product really helps internalize what it really means designing for everyone. So I will just emphasize that it's not to evaluate the feature or product scope. It really has a broader impact to people's mindset, the perception, and in general understanding internally, truly internalize what it means, how different people we are designing for.
Thank you, Yunju. I will jump in on that question. Two things come to mind for me. In the Headspace app, there has been a group meditation component where you can kind of meditate with others several times per day. And there's also a daily meditation, which is there for the day, and then it's refreshed tomorrow. So those are two kind of separate features. Being such a brand-driven company, we could sometimes have the tendency to over-brand things. And we actually, those two features came out. The daily meditation was called Everyday Headspace, and the group meditation was called Everybody Headspace. So we thought, that's really clever. Great. That's a brand moment in the product. And in testing and sharing that out, we started to see that what made sense to us, like project names internally, didn't really work, for maybe a new user. And we know that we do get a pretty big influx of new people who have maybe never heard of Headspace. We work on it every day, so it's what I think about, for most of my working day, which is like a huge chunk of my life. So I'm so in it that it's hard to get out of it a little bit. So you got to get, I think, the user testing just as a gut check, and to see if people are understanding that. And that's a big kind of a way I think copy has made a huge difference on a feature's success. And then just in testing, we know who our core audience is. We think we do, and there are there's socioeconomic things attached to that. There's location attached to that. So we could spin up a user test and we could say, this person in this city, or these kinds of people in these cities with this kind of salary, interested in health, wellness, well-being, diet, etc. And you would probably get some more favorable results from those tests. And it's kind of, I think if you're not checking yourself, you might just go down that path. So I think keeping it really wide open, and more, especially as we're going more international, is important. And then the second part, I'll be brief with it, is we developed a family plan. We have a student and family plan, or two different plans, on kind of as a alternative to the regular subscriptions. And in testing, we learned that family means something different to everybody. And so we decided not to be super strict about the address verification and all these things that you think might make maybe something that a telecommunications company might do. So for us, family it's a little bit of a wider, more broad term, and that helped decide kind of the direction we went with the family plan.
Really interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing those examples. Okay, moving on to the next question, which is interesting, and maybe JR, you can lead this one and others can chime in. What are a few trends in design and the tools that you're using, that you are using to improve your inclusive design processes? Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I am muted. I didn't say anything too profound.
Okay.
1 second though. No, I'd say probably the most important tool that we're using is discussion. I think in tech, we tend to try to automate and create frameworks for everything, but no, sometimes it's just about having a conversation between humans. Actually, like one of my colleagues, actually, she led this really good discussion amongst our design team. We have an accessibility group, and it was designing for cognitive bias, which the entire team read, and we discussed what that means to design for acknowledge our cognitive bias, because not only are everyone on this call is designers, but everyone in our society, we're adhering to some design system. And so whether or not it is heteronormativity or patriarchy, or even the lines that we follow on the road are a design system that we're kind of indoctrinated into. And the only way to really build inclusive products is to kind of swim against stream oftentimes. Sometimes we have to challenge our own preconceived notions about certain things. That's why it's important to have a diverse bunch of people at the table in these design discussions. But it's also important to have people that, like with a research testing, making sure the people that you're bringing in to test things on are diverse. And also just having conversation, having conversation, having tough conversations. And it's so important to do some heavily, that I'd say the most important tool that we have been doing, especially at Google on my teams, is listening. And listening to users, listening to each other, and listening deeply before we even make a design decision that will impact inclusivity.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, JR. I'm going to move to the next question because we want to get through as many as possible, get as much information out of you, wonderful panel, as we can. The next question, maybe Yunji, you can lead this one. Have you witnessed an example where inclusive design failures have impacted a business, I guess, adversely, where something was missed? You used that one example just now on the wearables. Is there any other example of that?
Yes,
And then maybe
yes.
on the flip side, if anyone's got an example of where great inclusive design has actually helped a business grow financially. Yeah.
Yeah, I can start. I have a bunch of good successful stories like this time. I'm gonna share not so successful story. At Qualcomm in 2012, we developed an AR shopping app for American Opera. I don't know if you have been to any of American Opera store, but they have, can I see? They have this neat design for each product, which is a perfect as an AR target image. Standardize the format, and it's easy to communicate for user to what to point at for AR technology. After multiple iterations and the lab user testing, it was in solid shape. So we conducted a field testing at an actual American Opera store. Guess what? What happened had nothing to do with the UI design, nothing to do with the technology. But the problem was that physical interaction didn't accommodate a diverse set of human bodies. So in this case, the product sign was just too high for her to reach, to point easily. Again, it was nothing to do with your product design, nothing to do with the technology behind. It was all about including all different human bodies in an actual scene at the store. One size fit all does not work for everyone, for sure.
No, certainly not. Any examples where inclusive design has actually helped from a financial sense to grow a business and show success in that side?
Yeah, I'll tap in just on something that that I found remarkable was, and it was news to me, was that Ben and Jerry's as an ice cream company actually have, they're very committed to their inclusion and diversity practice. There's a lot of articles out there, and you know, I wish I'd known, but I only discovered it about a year ago. But the way that they approach it is really remarkable because I think one, I'm making a lot of assumptions here. It's probably led to some product creation, as in they do a lot of vegan ice cream. So I think you know, saying like responding to the market, and probably internally in their hiring practices, they've been exposed to people with different types of diets, with different types of food sensitivities. And then on the sort of like brand and response side, I get the sense that when there is something social happening in the world, Ben and Jerry's PR team does not need to scramble and figure out, how are we going to respond to this? You know, how do they firmly have a stance on many things. And if you dig it up on their website, you will see Ben and Jerry's keep it 100. Like they keep it real. It is like so impressive. And I would love to see a future world where brands and products are like loud and proud about that stuff. So they're not only responding in a way that will be favorable to the business, but they are being authentic. And Gen Z is probably the most authentic generation of all, and they are not here for this like I bring my work self to work, but I might keep my home stuff at home. Like, no, it's like, it's all in or not. And they respond to that very well. And I don't know, I'm rambling a bit, but I think that's just like, that's a future I would love to see, where we have that truth and transparency kind of all the way through.
Great. Okay, everyone, we've got 10 minutes now, and we have tons of amazing questions that have come in. I'm going to shut my mouth and head to the questions board. So hold on to your seats. We're going to get through as many of these as possible. Panelists, obviously mindful of time. Let's get to the point and move on to the next one. Okay, so the first one for JR, what is the worst example of idiomatic writing that you can recall? I love this idea, but want to ensure I'm ready, that I'm not already doing this in my product.
Oh my God, I can't say that I was so traumatized that I could recall the worst writing I've ever seen, these many years later. Oftentimes I do play a game when I'm driving down the highway and I see a billboard, and if I pass a billboard and I say to myself, WTF, it was pretty bad copy, and that's usually like my barometer. If I could tweet out afterwards if it comes to me what that worst copy was, but I can't think of it. I'm sorry to whomever you are that did not decide to internalize that bad copy in my soul.
All good. You are human, and you're in the spotlight with 1,000 people tuned in, so it's totally fun. You'll reach out to Kier afterwards, or Kier reach out to JR on LinkedIn and figure that out. Okay, next question is for Klaus.
Can I jump
of course,
in
yeah,
to share another example?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So it was the episode when I worked at Samsung smartwatch. At that point, we wanted to create more friendly, somewhat casual, more delightful tone on the writing, because it used to be very conservative and serious tone and manner on the Samsung UI. One of the features that we worked on at the time was waterlock. Means that you can still wear a smartwatch, you can do the swimming, it will be totally fine. That the pop-up UI message had in English, we studied as an English word, it studied as ready, right, jump in. This was to really create energy and encouragement and excitement that you can wear smartwatch and the water, right? Ready, right, jump in was translated in other languages, almost imply for jump into suicide, jump into die, jump into do some dangerous thing, like totally different nuance in different culture. It didn't translate those excitement. It was a literally dictionary translation. Jump in means that drop in, So we had to correct that for all different languages.
I'm sure there are a lot of brand managers out there tuned in, nodding their heads with other examples where they've thought they've had a great call to action and translations said otherwise. Okay, Klaus, what do you recommend using instead of user personas? You mentioned archetypes.
Yeah, archetypes. And I think well, use archetypes for sure, and realizing that there is a journey that every one of your users is on. Starts at a different place, they go through different hurdles, and I think that you just have to kind of take a look at Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to kind of understand how we all travel through this, through the knowns and the unknowns, and it impacts us differently. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Read more into archetypes for sure. Okay, Frank, I'm going to hit this one to your way. From Aaron, what are the first steps small businesses under 10 employees can take towards inclusive digital experiences? Great question.
It's a great question and a challenge I have not faced yet. So I'm gonna riff on that a little bit. 10 employees. I think taking a good look around the room and looking at each other. Have we built a business of with friends who look and talk and sound like us? And if you have that's how almost every Silicon Valley tech startup began. So that that's probably a good moment to start to think about the recruiting aspect and how you bring people in. you could look at hiring a consultant to support that. I think there's a lot of people out there, and definitely pay them. Don't expect a favor for the do-gooding or the do-gooder thing, because it's a nice thing to do or something. So you could do that. I would jump to Google and start to look around at best practices and what products, what services, what agencies have succeeded or failed, and just make sure that you're having that honest conversation with your team. And I think being the person who raises that and identifies this as a potential problem, as you grow, as you scale up, and try to tie it to not just the human aspect but the business aspect. That usually gets the finance team's attention. So it's like a part that I wish didn't exist. It didn't have to be done, but it's a way to get things done in the world we're in. So yeah, that's it.
Go for it, Yunju.
Yeah, I want to add the insight there that no one has a perfect solution. Meaning, big giant company, it doesn't matter how giant company that is when it comes to inclusive design. It doesn't mean that they have a better inclusive product. So don't think that having small team literally what do we do? No, that's not the truth. It's all about open for consumer feedback. So build the right tool that you can hear customers' feedback and iterate. Just being humble. No one is perfect. No one will cover every aspect. Just being humble, and then just acknowledge that we are going to iterate our product with our consumers together. So have this mind that this is a community. We need to build a community. We are going to listen. We welcome the feedback. We are going to iterate from there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yunju. Okay, JR, you can lead, and if nothing comes to mind or you have a few, everyone else should build on this. But are there any books on inclusive design or accessible design that you believe are important for designers tuned in today to note down and go and read?
Yes, I'd say Mismatch by Kat Holmes is great. I previously mentioned Design for Cognitive Bias, which is also really great. There's 99% Invisible. Just released a book as well on design and just kind of like the invisible design patterns that we have in it have around us. And then Accessibility for Everyone, which is also by a book apart, the same publisher that created Design for Cognitive Bias. I would also recommend Accessibility for Everyone. It's a fabulous book. I've read it multiple times and bought it for teammates, and I would definitely recommend checking those out.
Great. Anyone else have a great resource? Yeah, perfect.
Not a book, but a resource. We recently had Antoinette Carroll come in and speak. She has a creative lab called the Creative Reaction Lab. Get to know Antoinette Carroll. She had the one thing that leaped out to me was she said we should be designing with our customers and not for our customers. And I think that speaks to a little bit of something that that each one of the panelists today have touched on. Whether it's at the start of an initiative, getting to know your customer, bring them into the room, make sure your teams are representative of a diverse swath of society. And then in user testing, make sure that your test subjects are inclusive of the audience that you're trying to reach. So really amazing resource.
Right, and a book that I recently read was by Annie Jean-Baptiste from Google called Designing for Everyone. Check it out, also a great reference and resource.
Yeah.
Quick, JR, could you please share the name of the tool that you mentioned about measuring the accessibility of the language being used?
I would say there's different online, and I recall that, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember which platform talks about the reading levels. I don't have it off the top of my mind, but I can post it to LinkedIn or post it to Twitter right afterwards. I can't. I'm sorry. But yeah.
No worries. Yeah. Sorry, Yunji. I think I cut you off there.
Yeah, I +1 to JR, cat home mismatch. She's a pretty well-known advocate in this space, inclusive design. She described inclusive design as a building a sense of a belonging. That resonated with me deeply because a sense of a belonging is a core essence for human happiness, right? So when user feels it's made for me, made for my family, made for my gender, made for my country, it just creates emotional satisfaction. So to me, inclusive design is not just a matter of usability or utility aspect, but it's a matter of feeling and happiness.
Brilliant. What a way to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Well, a massive thank you on behalf of everyone that's tuned in to all of our amazing panelists. You were all so wonderful, so humble, and so insightful. It's been a pleasure hosting you on this event, and look out for the recap. We will be sharing that in the next 24, 48 hours. And so you can just note down those resources and those examples that have been shared. And if you are eager to step change and add value in your design career, BrainStation offers some of the most wonderful and enjoyable certificates and programs in user experience design and user interface design, which we highly encourage you to take a look at and speak to our learning advisors to determine if that's a good fit for you. But I can assure you, learning from industry leaders like we have on this panel today is what you will get in those courses. So now that we're 2 minutes over, everyone's running to their 2 p.m., wherever you might be, whatever time in the world it is. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure being with you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Stay well and stay safe. Bye, everyone.